it's right. It's just north of Cooper.
Yeah. All right, we're set. Call this meeting to order with the roll call, please.
Margaret Bowles,
Brian Cirkvenick.
Bob Ganesi.
Joy McCoy.
Peggy Smith.
Andy Miller. And it looks like Katie's coming to us from the Broom Hut, so.
Katie, you're muted. I made you a co-host.
There we are. Okay.
Katie Souls.
Whoop. Katie Souls from the room.
So we'll look for an approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Oh,
Second.
Katie moved, Brian seconded, all in favor?
Hi.
Any opposed? Thank you. All right, the consent agenda is just the minutes from the last meeting. Could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Thank you. All right, we'll start with an open forum. Looks like we're nothing in the room for open forum. Anything online? Do we have anybody other than Katie or?
No.
Okay,
Just Katie.
all righty. So we have just the one major agenda item tonight, which is the discussion of possible action for the plan of development for the Fraser Downtown Development Authority. So I don't think it's not a public hearing, is it? Do we need to call the order or?
No, this is not a public hearing.
Okay, all right. So we'll go start with the staff report.
Thank you, Chair Miller. So I just have a brief presentation to go over. I think a lot of the folks here on the Planning Commission have been involved with the DDA and a lot of the formation steps that have occurred up to this point. Some folks maybe less so than others. So I first wanted to spend some time just talking about what the Downtown Development Authority is and kind of the timeline up to this point. So we had a ballot measure in our April municipal election this year, and eligible electors voted in favor of establishing the DDA. The DDA was formally established by the Board of Trustees earlier this year in June. And then the Board of Trustees then appointed 11 members to the DDA board, one of which is the member of the Board of Trustees, that's Katie Souls. And broadly speaking, the Downtown Development Authority Board is charged with implementing this plan of development and facilitating development and redevelopment of the downtown Fraser area. And certainly a lot happened leading up to that election in April. Town staff has been working on this DDA initiative since last year. And really, it was one of the things that came out of the 2017 downtown strategic plan, as well as some other prior planning efforts. So it's been in the works for quite a while. As a reminder, here's a map of the DDA boundaries shown in yellow. So the DDA includes all properties in the town zone Riverwalk, including the Clayton Court area. It also includes Victoria Village, the Safeway and Murdoch shopping centers. Really it includes areas that are highly likely to develop or redevelop over the next 30 years, centered around kind of the historic downtown core of Fraser. The boundaries determine which parcels will contribute tax increment to the Downtown Development Authority, as well as determines where funding from the DDA can go. It can only be spent within, the boundaries shown here. So talking about this plan of development document, this really is kind of the most important foundational document for our Downtown Development Authority. Any projects undertaken by the DDA and therefore any, tax revenues that are spent by the DDA must be included in this plan of development. And the plan must be approved by the Board of Trustees before that tax increment revenue can be collected by the DDA or before any projects are funded by those revenues. So the town worked with Ayers Associates, a planning consultant, to draft this plan really in a very expedited timeline in roughly 2 weeks. They did have some good extensive engagement. The consultants were up here September 9th through 11th. They held both groups and individual meetings with members of the DDA board, as well as some trustees and planning commissioners, as well as other key stakeholders in the downtown area. I also want to note that they did receive and incorporate the results from our first survey for the comprehensive plan into their work to draft this plan of development. So they also did have, the results of that survey, which kind of encompass a more broader, just general Fraser resident or visitor, if you will. So per state statute, this plan of development has to go before the Planning Commission for your review. The Planning Commission may provide written feedback on the plan before it goes to the Board of Trustees for their final approval. And just something I wanted to note, in your review of the plan, I would just maybe advise to not focus so much on any issues with visual formatting of the document or any minor typos or grammatical errors that exist. Again, just this plan was drafted quite quickly, so I think some of those mistakes are in there. But really instead, I want us to focus on and think about whether the vision, the core strategies, and the goals that are outlined in this plan really align with your own knowledge and needs of, downtown Fraser and how we can go about improving it. So with that, I'll just dive into some of the key pieces of the plan of development. This here kind of summarizes the downtown vision statement. So I won't read all these, but this is kind of just more of an aspirational vision for our downtown area. We want to, support local businesses and commerce, have a vibrant downtown, and also one that's sustainable, both socially, environmentally, and fiscally. So I think this vision statement encompasses all of those, but if any of you all have any thoughts or feedback on this, we can certainly open it up to discussion now or as we dive into some of the core strategies that are outlined in the plan. Or if this vision is great, we can just move on.
I think we like it.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, the real key piece of the plan is these 5 core strategies, and the plan of development is organized around them. And essentially, these strategies guide how the DDA will invest the property tax increment revenues that it receives back into the downtown Fraser area. So the first one is, downtown Fraser is where business, spirit, and creativity are intertwined. This strategy kind of focuses around, supporting the local economy and supporting local businesses. and encouraging entrepreneurship and things like that. The second one is where downtown Fraser is where mountain dreams are within our means. This focuses more on, ensuring that downtown is still affordable and attainable, whether that's housing options, whether that's, commercial spaces that have reasonable rents and support local businesses, as well as, looking to develop properties that are currently underutilized and therefore maximizing their value. The third one is downtown Fraser is where the river flows through nature's heart. This strategy involves enhancing, the outdoor recreation and kind of natural features that are really assets to not just, Grand County as a whole, but really Fraser in the downtown area with the Fraser River running right through it. So making sure that development is, engaging with that natural environment and enhances and works with the Fraser River and not against it. The fourth strategy is downtown Fraser is where every journey is connected. This focuses mostly on kind of infrastructure improvements, whether that's multimodal transportation options, new street connections, optimizing parking and improving stormwater and drainage infrastructure. The last strategy is downtown Fraser is where the soul of Fraser thrives. This deals a lot with just making Fraser and downtown Fraser really the kind of focal point of the entire community. Promoting events and programs, creating public gathering spaces and things like that. So any thoughts or discussion on these kind of 5 core strategies?
I think the DDA board worked pretty hard on this, and
Yeah.
and I like what they've come up with.
Yeah.
So just diving into this a little bit more, each of these 5 core strategies also has a list of a bit more specific goals kind of tied to that strategy. So again, these aren't so specific as to provide, kind of a firm policy direction, like, if this opportunity arises, the DDA will then do this. But again, they're meant to be more high level, big picture goals that, the DDA will strive to achieve through the use of the tax increment financing. So again, the first one speaks a lot to,
So
go ahead.
I did note that future projects have to fit within this, though.
Yes.
Right, under state statute, and I was, that's why it needs to be kept fairly general, yet somewhat specific, but we need to think a little bit about the future and make sure everything fits within this, but I also noticed our planners put a lot of caveats, that if future changes, there's a lot of ways to plug things into this, no matter how innovative they may be in ways that we just don't realize, because this plan lasts for how many years?
So the DDA, the life of the DDA is for 30 years with 2 options for 10-year extension.
Yeah,
So
it could be up to 50 years.
up to
too.
50 years.
Yeah.
This plan can certainly be amended through that time.
Right.
It's not a static document.
It has to stay kind of within the spirit of it.
Yeah,
And like the state was driving at.
Yeah, and Sarah, maybe you can jump in and correct me, but in order for this plan to be amended, it has to go back through a public hearing process and approved by the board. So, I mean,
Yeah, hi, Sarah Catanzarite, Assistant Town Manager and Interim Executive Director of the DDA. The plan of development is meant to be pretty broad and overarching so that ideally it can last throughout the life of the DDA. So there is an amendment process. Basically, we have to go through the same process we're going through now of providing it to Planning Commission to provide written recommendations, having a public hearing and getting Board of Trustees approval. So you ideally try to create something that's broad enough and overarching enough that it captures the vision, but allows for jets and skyways, 20 years from now when those are invented, because that falls within multimodal transportation.
Right.
So the idea is to give them direction and vision. Any projects do have to be within this plan and within the scope of these goals, but those goals are broad enough that, it could be the train, it could be a trolley, it could be expanded lift bus service, that those all kind of fit within that multimodal bucket as an example.
Okay.
Katie, did you have something to say? Or
No,
okay.
I'm cutting my salmon. I've been very busy and I have to eat because you know what happens when I don't eat. My brain doesn't work.
Thanks, Garrett.
Yeah, so I guess just to close the loop on that, I mean, yes, ultimately this plan is meant to be broad in nature to allow for, you know, a range of types of things that the DDA could fund, but some of those things could be, building new infrastructure or improving existing infrastructure, whether that's utilities, roads and streets or parking. It could be go towards, partnerships with private development projects to, provide some funding there in exchange for some sort of public benefit. The DDA can use these revenues to acquire land. It can be used on renovations or expansions of existing buildings within the DDA. It can be used for parks and public spaces, things like marketing campaigns or promotions, or even helping to, hold or support, community events and gatherings. So it's really quite a big range of things, but all with the focus of improving and enhancing the downtown area.
Here,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to just expand on a comment that Andy made a minute ago, because I was looking at this and I suppose I was probably being too narrowly focused on the wording, but it sounded like, for instance, if you had a developed piece of property within our boundaries of the DDA, and we decided that we wanted to make an attempt to fund and buy that underdeveloped piece of real estate. Are these goals broadly stated enough to allow you to do that? Or do you have to specifically have identified the piece of property that you're going to funnel the money to buy? I was thinking for 30 years, who knows what we're going to be doing 5 years from now, maybe even 2 years from now, what opportunities are going to come up. So my question was, how does one of these projects get put into this plan without having to go through this process that we're doing now?
Yeah, and maybe Sarah, you can chime in on this as well. But I think I'll first try to find
It's under the policies, page 23, property
you.
acquisition
Yeah.
policy.
So thank you, Brian. I think property acquisition is listed under one of the 5 core strategies. But drilling down into the specific detail of, okay, under what circumstances would the DDA acquire a property? How would they evaluate, that decision? That is frankly yet to be determined, and it's not necessarily part of this plan of development document. So as Brian mentioned here, part of the implementation steps that's identified in this plan is to create some of those policy and guidance documents that really the DDA board would create kind of in conjunction with town staff around, again, under what conditions would they acquire property? Under what conditions would the DDA partner with the developer? Under what conditions would they fund an event or things like that? So I think those kind of specific, if this, then we do this types of questions are yet to be answered, if that makes sense. But broadly speaking, property acquisition would be allowed under this plan of development.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and I'll just add the where mountain dreams are within our means category does speak to this, and it talks about to achieve this vision, the DDA must actively collaborate with developers and property owners as opportunities arise. This involves, but may not be limited to, acquiring key properties, making strategic investments in projects, and helping property owners in upgrading older buildings. And then one of the goals under that strategy does specifically kind of talk about acquiring properties. But as Garrett has referenced, they would develop kind of work plans and policies that would dive into the specifics, because those are policies and work plans that will be developed and can be revisited every few years versus this plan, which would be more long-term, hopefully.
Now, this is a conceptual document rather than a project document.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
part of our contract with heirs, they are helping us develop a work plan for kind of the immediate future that would be based on these goals for the DDA as well.
So who would own the property? Would the DDA own it?
The DDA can own property.
Okay.
Is that decision subject to town board approval, or is that strictly a DDA?
The town board does have to approve their budget every year. So if
Okay.
they were budgeting for things like that, the town council could, approve it or not approve it. But
So I think in lieu of going back to the presentation, the next few slides were literally just the text from, these next few pages copied through. So, if there are any thoughts on potential changes to these goals for each of these categories, I mean, I can just leave this up on the screen and give everyone time to read them and digest them. And if there's any thoughts on either something that's missing from these goals or things that we could tweak or change in this language.
I know everybody's reading. Feel free to keep reading, but on the last page before the fine print, page 24, it ends with the word "or."
Yeah, I noticed that. I noticed that too.
yeah, heirs gave us the content and normally they would ask for like 10 business days to format this. And we're like, well, actually, we'd like to present it to the planning commission. Could we get it back in like 3 days?
Yeah.
So there's a couple things with the formatting. That one is actually in the resolution of the DDA board. I can read that language to you.
Okay. Yeah,
So it should say, it should end with sub areas of the district to promote visual interest and consistency. So heirs had requested that we wait till we get any additional feedback from the planning commission to kind of clean up a couple of these typos and formatting things. And maybe there might be 1 or 2 pictures that we look to change out. But they just wanted to be able to kind of do that in one swoop. We had already gone back and forth a few times, asking them to revise the document. So
gotcha. Everything else looked good. They tend to be.
yeah, there's a
grammar
duplicate
that's-
image on page 25 and that will come out, with a couple bullet points. But if you see anything else, let us know and we'll include that in the formatting cleanup.
Cool.
Yeah, this is the duplicate image that was mentioned, but yeah, as Sarah mentioned, this document has already been reviewed by the DDA board. And in their resolution, they kind of called out some of those specific things as well as just a catch-all, for formatting changes and enhancements that are just for the appearance of the document and don't change the content. So those kinds of things we're aware of, and they'd be caught before it goes to the board, certainly.
So, I have a question. So for example, if we were interested in doing an architectural review, where would that be, in this, or is that for later down the road where that would be something the DDA itself would do? Where would that fit in?
That's a good question. So that goes to, this brief section that we were just mentioning that was cut off.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, but it speaks to, the DDA could look to promote specific design guidelines for projects within the DDA boundaries. I think if something like that gets implemented, I think it would certainly be in conjunction with the planning commission, because I think we would look to adopt that into our land development code. And since it's a change to chapter 19, it needs to go to the planning commission and then ultimately the board for approval. But certainly the DDA board as a key downtown stakeholder could provide input to what those design guidelines would be, if that makes sense. But this plan by itself does not implement any sort of architectural design guidelines or review process or. Yeah.
okay.
And they really, in their role, can advocate for those sorts of things, but ultimately it comes back to the planning commission, the board of trustees, in terms of actually changing or approving anything in our code or officially adopting something like that.
So if, for example, we, as the planning commission, would like to see architectural review, how does that get started? Who says, okay, how does that get going?
Yeah, I mean, I know we talked about this, gosh, I want to say close to a year ago, very briefly. I think ultimately it's just going to have to take staff time and or hiring a consultant to implement something like that. Design guidelines, again, would be implemented into our land development code, and then subsequently, reviewed and enforced through the land use approval process, certainly. I think when we briefly talked about this a year ago, I mentioned, for example, the town of Winter Park has a 50 to 100 page or so design guideline document. Frankly, we could take and use whatever we wanted from that, and that could be a good starting point. We could look to certainly other municipalities outside the county, even outside the state, for types of design guideline language that we could just implement ourselves. So I think if that is more of a focus, especially as we're looking to a broader development and redevelopment of our downtown area, I do think that's something that would get implemented. Part of the challenge with the timeline as well, I will say, is with the comprehensive plan update. Part of the scope of work of that is a kind of conceptual vision, focusing on the downtown area. I think the exact extents are going to kind of focus more on the Clayton Court area than say the entire DDA boundary, for example. But I think even just that kind of concept plan can help inform some of the design guidelines that we would look to implement in our code, if that makes sense. So I think kind of it's a step-by-step process. So,
And remember, you did bring those Winter Park regulations to us at one time, and we looked at that, and that would be a good conversation to get back to, so,
that's fair. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out how do you get that process going? We've got all these different things going and
Yeah.
We had it going for a little while.
yeah,
Yeah.
who does that? I mean, do you do that? You just take it upon yourself, or do we instruct you, or how does that work?
Well, I would say the planning commission certainly could provide staff with recommendations that they would like to see considered. Certainly. And then staff could work to implement them. But yeah. So getting back to the first core strategy and those goals, were there any thoughts or comments on these? Again, this focuses more on things that the DDA could do to, support local businesses, and entrepreneurship and things like that.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a good framework without being too specific,
Yeah, pretty vague.
Yeah, the second set, again, this had to deal with kind of affordability and attainability. So, these goals would allow, just for example, the DDA to provide funding to a developer to build additional affordable housing units. It could result in, I know something that was talked about was where, say, one commercial space's rent is kind of subsidized by the DDA or some mechanism like that. So that's kind of what this section speaks to.
Yeah, this is where your support for local land use codes and possible modifications would come in, so.
Mhm. The third one, again, had to deal with kind of outdoor spaces in the Fraser River. So um,
the interface with the river here, so.
Mhm. Fourth one dealt a lot with infrastructure, uh, street design changes, streetscape, stormwater infrastructure, connectivity, walkability of our downtown, multimodal transportation.
Yeah, and this is gonna be a struggle. We've talked about this in the past, the parking conversation that they mentioned in a couple of meetings, but I just heard the other day that there, in the United States, there are 7 parking spaces for every car that we have. So,
Wow.
so, but I hope we have a brighter future where train more viable, we have more funding for the bus system.
Mhm.
We have great ways to move people around and people get here without their cars, so I hope we don't go on the road to too many parking spaces. They're so expensive and really drive the cost of everything up. So, but they're necessary too. You got to get people to your business.
Yeah, certainly.
Be a hard balancing act. Thanks for being on the CDOT.
Yeah.
Maybe so. Now, what I think we've really got to take a close look at how we get people through town, you know, that aren't going to stop in any case. Make it fairly painless. I keep going back to that. Breckenridge was retrofit so late in the game, and it worked out pretty well. Highway 9's route through Breckenridge is a good way to get through town. You know, that came I mean, if this had been done a long time ago, it'd be a lot easier. But I still think there's opportunities in Fraser for us to make some ways to get through town without turning US 40 into a 4-lane, pretty non-pedestrian friendly route. So
Sure.
I think this leaves all the options. Seems like it.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the plan is meant to be fairly broad in nature. Part of this was, the DDA has yet to finalize their budget for the next year, as well as, a work plan for next year, which I think really the focus of this next year is going to be to hammer out some of these kind of policy and guidance documents, if that's correct, right, Sarah?
Correct, yeah. They'll have a little money to play with for projects, but we'll still be kind of wading their way through policies and getting their ducks in a row.
You saw the lift is going to 15 minutes for the black line, right?
That's right.
That's really good news. Yeah.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah, so just to close this discussion out, I mean, talking about implementation and next steps, as we already kind of discussed, but ultimately, if the planning commission doesn't have any major feedback, that's okay. This plan will be considered and approved by the Board of Trustees via public hearing. As I mentioned, the DDA board is working towards a work plan and budget for next year, as well as drafting those policy type documents.
So one thing I didn't notice anywhere in there was how they work with the chamber or how any DDA boards work with their local chambers of commerce.
Catherine Ross did provide input and we talked with her, and she has met with the DDA board. I believe there is language somewhere about working with partners such as the chamber.
Yeah, because there's mention of the town board and the planning commission, but I didn't notice the chamber. I just, sit on a handful of committees and I don't want everybody doing the same work and,
Yeah. When utilizing resources too. So
right.
No, and I know the DDA board, we had the Chamber, Grand County Economic Development, Patrick Brower of Grand Enterprise Initiative, came and spoke somewhat briefly because we were trying to get focused on this, but just to talk about what they did, and the board was very eager to work with them and to tap into their expertise and things that they're already doing.
Okay.
Yeah, I think maybe although the chamber isn't explicitly called out, I think they would definitely fall under this category of political leadership, funders, community partners.
Yeah.
And I think certainly we would view the chamber as a key partner on any sort of initiative that the DDA does. It's probably safe to say. So, but that's a good point.
So, I have a question about the authority that the DDA might have in terms of being proactive with some of these grants and ways of implementing the plan. It was mentioned in there a few places where part of what the DDA could do would be work with businesses to improve the exteriors of their structures, or if there's code issues with their structures, perhaps help them bring those structures or buildings up to code. Now, how proactive can they be? Can they say, your building looks like crap, and we really need you to come to us and ask for money so you can make your building look like it fits into our grand plan?
They can. I guess it's to be determined if that's the best strategy or not. But I know we have some DDA board members that are very eager to start knocking on doors and having such conversations. Initially, we've talked about, and the Board of Trustees have approved having them involved in the Town of Fraser's Business Enhancement Grant Program. So that is focused primarily on improving like facades for current businesses. And in the past, I don't think it's been super well marketed. And a lot of businesses, I don't think, are aware it exists, or nobody's knocking on their door, encouraging them to apply for it. And part of the idea of involving the DDA in that process was that they could be those people in the streets, kind of having those conversations with businesses and property owners and encouraging them to maybe consider applying for the business enhancement grant and being able to do some improvements to their property. We also, the Board of Trustees approved upping the maximum award amount to $25,000. And then the business would be expected to provide a match as well, with the idea that previously it was 7,500, and that's just not enough in the current day and age to really do much. So I think that's a number we'll continue to kind of evaluate moving forward. But trying to provide that leverage. And I think as you have new developments and things coming in with them having that tax increment they'll have money to play with, and can hopefully help incentivize development that the community and the DDA would like to see versus just having kind of the stick of code enforcement and things like that.
I think Fisher's is a good example, Bob, of the some of the work the town did with that business. That facade is partially funded by the town for sure with Katie Fisher. So
good improvement.
Yeah.
So, okay, I think that answers my question. Your marketing strategy and plan for implementation will be important because, like you said, you don't want to be too authoritarian as the DDA going to business owners and say, you must do this, you must do that. But helpful and encouragement and competition would do a lot, I think. If you have a good plan, a good strategy for what the image of the town in general overall, and the more activity that you generate that way, people doing things to improve their looks of their buildings and things like that, it'll catch on, and you'll have an easier time with the next and the next and the next, I think. So yeah, good. Okay.
And they ultimately don't have the authority to, condemn or eminent domain or anything like that, but hopefully they've got the carrot to help incentivize.
But if it's code issues or if there's a safety issue, the DDA may not, but the town of Fraser may be able to come in and twist a few arms and say, hey, you've got a safety violation here and you've got to correct this. So.
Correct.
Yeah.
It is a good point to veer toward informing people of the opportunities that are out there. Hey, there's this grant available. if you'd like you to utilize it. Twisting of the arms, I think, is met with some stone walls. So yeah, keep it positive is a good thing.
This brings resources to the table.
Mhm.
Yeah, and the DDA has the opportunity in the future to develop their own sort of facade programs or other incentive programs apart from the town program that could either complement or supplement or supplant the town program at some point.
Well, isn't that part of a discussion that we just had about architectural review? I mean, it works into that. If you're gonna have an image that you want to see portrayed on all the structures in the town, then, you know, you gotta create that image, you gotta sell people on the idea and
Gotta help them with it.
help with it.
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure. But along the line, somewhere that might include some architectural review to make sure that if they are going to make improvements to their structure, that it does fit within the general strategy and image that we're trying to create for Funky Fraser. I noticed somebody worked that in a couple of times. That just won't die, will it?
And I'll say I know of at least one community where they have joint DDA and planning commission meetings. So that's something we could look at in the future if, you know, it was something like architectural standards that the groups wanted to kind of jointly look at.
Yes,
Good idea.
yeah.
Mhm. I think that would have been, had we had the DDA, when, we were doing the building across from Fisher's, Cosling. If we had the DDA then and they'd been up and running, I think we would have wanted them to attend our planning commission meetings with the developer. So,
Yeah.
And I'll just mention too, I know she jumped on a few minutes late, but Lori Hannon, our DDA chair, has been attending virtually. If she's still there.
Did she make it in or? Maybe pause for a little, do we have any input from the public at all or?
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I was forced to unmute. I was forced not to be able to unmute. Hi, yeah, I just wanted to thank Sarah for participating while I'm traveling. And yeah, I'm happy to like meet as well with anyone to discuss any specifics or concerns that you have later after the fact.
Come back to you in just a second, Lori. We've got
she can finish.
that's all right.
That's okay. She can finish. that.
Any questions for Lori at all or?
And I did want to say earlier, I couldn't get off mute, that the goal for the like the facade improvement isn't to coerce or it's to collaborate. That's kind of the intention that we discussed, and that's my intention at least, is to collaborate with to improve the businesses as both the DDA and the business itself sees fit. So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah.
In regards to that. So thank you.
Thanks, Lori. I like that word collaborate. That's
Yeah.
more in the spirit of what this document seems to be about. So
I hope so. Good.
Well, I kind of, this is Parnell Quinn, Town of Fraser. I live in the DDA. Some of the folks that live on the street that I'm on, they were concerned, and it sounds like collaboration is what you want, but they were concerned if they would be forced to provide commercial housing or, forced to do housing that is price fixed and provide commercial space for businesses if they develop their properties. They wanted to know if that was going to be a must have to do with their properties. In the current town code, I believe we don't allow strictly storage units in the DDA district. Is that correct?
I think we landed on no storage businesses today.
I think that was in 2019 when
Yeah.
we changed that code.
I can verify that right now, but yeah.
Sure. The other one is, how much additional time will this take developers to get developments done? Will the DDA cause more delays in development time, or should that go hand in hand?
Shall I respond?
Sure.
If you're allowed to.
Yeah,
Transparency.
so with the plan of development, this document would not require any of those things in terms of
Okay.
your neighbors' concerns with what they have to do with their buildings. Again, the DDA itself can advocate for policies and work for policies, but ultimately those sorts of decisions rest with the planning commission and the board of trustees if things were to ever, for example, be rezoned to require something like that, but I don't envision that
Okay.
happening. And then your last question, I don't know about the storage units, was about, oh, if it delays development.
Yeah, if it'll take more time going through the DDA process, or if you guys implement a architectural review committee group. whatever you call that.
Architectural review committee, I guess, would be another question, but again, I think ultimately that would rest with the planning commission. The DDA could provide input and help shape that vision. But they don't have an official spot, so to speak, to stop a development or whatnot. They can help incentivize things that they would like to see with development. They can encourage enhancements of the river walk behind a development's property and help fund that and that
Okay.
sort of thing. But they're not another kind of formal step in that review process, so to speak.
So,
for
so if there's a
developments.
project in the DDA, then, Sarah, we don't require a review by the DDA then. So in other words, yeah, not another step in the development process.
I mean, I think they would like to be involved,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
think it would make sense to involve them, but in terms of officially, correct me if I'm misspeaking about anything, Garrett, in terms of an official, like, this is gonna add another 30 days because the DDA has to review it, that wouldn't happen.
Okay.
The same kind of code and process that's in place would be in place.
Well, if it were in the DDA district, wouldn't we send out to the DDA when it's coming before us? Wouldn't we send out just like we do to XL Energy and
Mhm.
Mountain Parks? And
That's what I was
they
thinking.
would be on the list of, they would get
A
the
review
Or the
agency.
review
plan.
agency basically,
Yeah,
and they would have an opportunity to comment on the plans and bring that to us in their comments review.
Okay, I kind of told them that, but I just want to make sure that
Yeah,
I'm
no,
not the
I
only one saying that.
think you're right on there.
And then this one is my own question. Will the DDA finally help to get the power lines buried, the unsightly power lines we have all through the downtown development?
They're so expensive.
Funny, that question
it's not
came
that
up
expensive.
when I was walking around with Mike from Ayers that helped put this together. Within this plan, I think that is something that they could legally help
Start-
with.
start, okay.
I don't know that it's gonna be top on their list, just largely because it is so expensive, but
And then where are we with the comprehensive plan? Off topic a little bit, but you mentioned it earlier, to make sure that we're aligned with the two processes. And then I did get this comment from quite a few people. That there's a lot of people that don't like to speak at public meetings because they get harassment. I don't seem to mind it as much. With all the drug and alcohol issues in Fraser and Grand County, can we stop celebrating the 1960s and 1970s drug event leaving planet Earth? We have it in all our documents, and it's all about getting high and getting stoned. And
No, I don't think it's true.
that is true.
No,
That's
it's
where it
not,
comes from.
Darnell. I'm sorry, but yeah.
Then tell me where it comes from,
The
because everybody
stories
I
on
know,
our
It
website.
comes from Ed Stahl that was just here 2 weeks ago.
No,
It was
comes
a,
from-
it
it
was a
comes from
prank
parties
campaign
they
on and it's been an annual reunion.
Yeah,
And
I'm-
us all folks enjoy the reunions. But anyway,
yeah, well, I'm
That's-
just telling you the people that read it, that's how they see it, and
yeah.
they'd prefer to have it taken out of the town advertisements and codes and stuff like that.
Well, that's not this.
Maybe that is what the DDA is. The DDA is to improve the town and its image.
Thanks, Parnell.
I think if I could speak to some of the questions here briefly.
Sure.
So any industrial use, including, outdoor storage or warehousing, is a conditional use in the Riverwalk zone, as well as the business zone. I don't think there's a single zone in Fraser currently where those uses are permitted by right. So broadly speaking, if any sort of development includes those, they'd have to go through the conditional use permit process. And then, it was a good question bringing up about what is the DDA's role in land use application approvals. I think, to Bob's point about including them on the referral review, I almost think that's almost like too late in the process. My vision would be more, the kind of pre-application discussions we have with developers, the more ideation stage, if you will, before plans are finalized and they're coming to the town. I think at that point is where we would try to loop in the DDA, especially if they have some sort of funding request, right? Like, we would like to do this development and we are going to provide the town with this public benefit and we are requesting this funding in order to do so. Right. So,
Is sketch plan too late?
no, I think sketch plan is, it's certainly an appropriate time.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed to me like as we're learning that somebody's coming forward with a sketch plan for us, that would be the ideal time to loop them in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the staff will be aware, and like you say, there may be resources available for these projects, so that's where staff will let the applicant know, and that
Mhm.
clues them in that it's time to go to work with a little bit with the DDA, because they have access to those purse strings, so.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And if they were looking to access to DDA funds, then obviously the DDA would be the ones signing off on that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, Clark?
The first comment, is there, were there mushrooms at the reunion party? I mean, they're legal now and, I don't know.
We're all in our seventies and eighties now, man.
I don't know. Anyway, I haven't heard any concerns from the Grand Park residents, but I don't think they get invited to the, leaving planet. Oh, Brian, you might go. I don't know, but,
No,
Peggy, I heard was there, right? So,
most of our,
But I was,
well,
I was
maybe
in that
that's where
generation.
y'all could collaborate with developers on ideas and how to develop this town, or maybe that's how it happened. Maybe that's why we have what we have. I don't know.
no, Clark, our main agenda item at these Leaving Planet Earth reunions is reviewing everybody that's gone, and so probably pretty soon Parnell will be gone, so
They've
Oh,
no
left
worries.
Planet Earth.
We've left Planet Earth, yeah,
Yeah.
so anyway,
Well,
Sorry.
hopefully you don't get to talk about me anytime soon. Anyway, I think this is great. I think great job. I just want to compliment everybody here on that. And I think it's about time. I think long overdue to clean up what I think is, not very appealing in a whole lot of ways. And I hope this will give you the resources and the drives to do it. And I would just encourage the DDA and whoever's ultimately in charge of all the DDA stuff. Bob, I wouldn't wait until sketch plan. I would, lay out kind of ideas and quite honestly, by the time we're at sketch plan, given what's required with sketch plan and Fraser, it's already been designed, right? I mean, it is designed. I mean, it requires engineering, involvement, grading involvement, et cetera. Way better to sit down at a conceptual level and discuss with people, what are your goals and desires? And if they have a property and they're looking to improve the property, I mean, you've got a lot of properties there that are going to have to change hands most likely for improvements to happen. So we all understand that. And, that will happen over what is probably a very long time frame. But that's how this whole thing's conceived anyway. And that also drives more money. The more improvement is, the more money, because your property tax revenue increases at this point are not going to come from just general value increases. They're going to come from the properties being improved, because with the mass increase that just happened in real estate values and kind of where the market is, I think it's probably somewhat flat here for a little bit in terms of real estate valuation. So you really want to encourage that development. And I would just say that, as a developer in the community, I do a few little things here and there. I think collaborating more often and early is way more helpful than some development. I mean, like sitting around my office going, I wonder what I could do next. I wonder what this will work. Sitting there. I mean, literally, I think if you reached out to some of the key properties, or, I know Greg and Kevin are heavily involved in some of this area, but not all of it. But really setting forth the goals and inviting people to say, hey, if you really want to do something, we'd really like to help, and being way more proactive than the town is and encouraging. And then maybe the DDA can help. That would help streamline and make the actual going from sketch plan to final plat or whatever they need to do. I mean, I'm not sure it would involve subdivisions even. I mean, some of it could just be building remodels. I mean, Ski Broker's a great example. Okay, guys, I was the DDA in the instance of that property. I'm still not done. I haven't gotten any grant funding. It was a very expensive project. And the only reason that we did it was frankly, the Taco John's was just not very appealing. And, you know, lo and behold, I mean, I think we've ended up with a pretty nice property there that's helped that area, and it's got more improvements coming to it. That'll, you know, ultimately enhance it even further. But I mean, those types of things, that was conceived in my office, right? And I think if you had goals and said, hey, you know, this is kind of a real eyesore and, you know, so-and-so owns it, maybe, you know, maybe Peggy or maybe Andy, you know, this person, maybe you could reach out and be a little bit more encouraging or supportive of, you know, maybe we can help you improve the value of your property and help improve the value of the neighborhood and so on and so forth. I would just say, I think overall where you're at, what you've done in a very short time is very good. And I think it's great. And I would encourage you to not wait until sketch plan, just be a little bit more collaborative and reach out to people that you want to try to make things happen with. Okay. But good job.
input.
Really good job.
Good input. And
Thanks, Clark.
did you take note of that, Andy? I think Clark was saying that sometimes we might have to encourage some people to leave planet Earth.
I do encourage you to apply for the business enhancement grant off of the town's website if it would benefit you.
New signs.
All right, any other people online? Have we had anybody? Okay.
No, just Katie and
Okay.
Brian.
Okay. Anything else from the board here?
Oh, I think overall, it's good.
Just to let
Discussion.
you know I'm still here. I think that it's a great document and a wonderful move for the town. And we'll be able to, through the DDA, offer incentives for businesses, business owners, and developers to create more of what we'd like to see.
Yeah, Katie, thanks for hustling up that one vote that made it happen. So it's appreciated.
So I did provide this resolution in the packet. The intent of this is really just to document that this plan of development has been reviewed by the Planning Commission and that we are following the letter of the state statutes. Since there sounds like there are no specific recommendations on the plan of development from the Planning Commission, I just proposed some of the following changes to this, just removing this from the title of the resolution, since we are not providing written recommendations. And then down here, just saying that, you know, the Planning Commission hereby provides no further recommendations with respect to the proposed plan of development. Is everyone okay with those changes to this resolution?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion approving the resolution 240901 with the amendments that Garrett just mentioned.
A second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we're passed unanimously. Thanks. Good work, Sarah. And Garrett?
Thank you all.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you all.
Yeah, and thank you to Andy and Peggy and Garrett and Brian, who all participated in the process as well as obviously Katie.
All righty, so in other business, we haven't recognized our new assistant town planner. So,
Yes.
Alan, we're happy to have you on board.
Thank you. Yeah, Alan Sealiff. I've been an assistant town planner. Joined the town a little over 2 weeks ago, working closely with Garrett to get up to speed, and look forward to working with everyone here moving forward. I'm most recently from the city of Wheat Ridge, worked as a planner there, and have lived on the Front Range. I'm from Colorado, but lived in the Front Range in the Denver area. So got a little bit of family up here, and it was a great opportunity to make that transition. So I'm happy to be here.
Did we find you a roof over your head or?
I have, yeah, relatively quickly. We feel super fortunate for that.
Good.
No.
And a nook up in the upstairs or?
What was that?
Did we find you a nook for a?
Oh, yeah.
desk or-
He found it on his own.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, very
Oh.
excited to have Alan on board. Excited for going from a planning department of no in-house staff a little over a year ago to now two is very exciting. So thank you to Michael and certainly the Board of Trustees for flying that position, and very grateful for Alan joining the town. Very excited for things to come. So
welcome.
Yep.
So any other business or future agenda items?
Could we get just a quick update on where we stand with the comprehensive plan update?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that was something I failed to answer from
Or
Parnell, so I
yeah.
apologize. But yes, so our first survey is officially closed. I spoke with our consultants today, kind of talking about those results at a high level. We got around 180 responses, which I think is pretty good. A good cross section of, again, kind of a maybe typical Fraser resident or Fraser visitor, with some, responses from folks who live outside of Fraser, but in the county. So the consultant will be presenting, the results of that survey more formally to the board of trustees on October 16th. And then town staff will deliver that same presentation to the planning commission. So for the folks who do double duty as planning commissioners and trustees, I apologize in advance for getting that presentation twice, but just for the sake of presenting it to the planning commission as well as the board. And then in terms of next steps moving forward, our kind of second round of public engagement, we're targeting for February. And some of the things that will be presented in there will include, the downtown Riverwalk area concept plan, some more, kind of future land use components to the plan, capital improvements with regards to public infrastructure, whether that's, our current water sewer CIP, I think, is a 10-year lookout from 2022, seeing what we can do to extend that time horizon a bit, looking at transportation related capital improvements. So, we're moving along, and I'm trying to, expedite certainly the kind of downtown concept plan piece of that, because I know that's something that it's a piece of the scope of work that I think everyone is really excited about and certainly wants to see sooner than later. So that's kind of the current status.
One more question. In this comprehensive plan, are we also going to come up with a new 3-mile plan too?
Yes, yes. So certainly the boundaries of that 3-mile plan won't change since we haven't had any annexations. But part of the comprehensive plan is to kind of better evaluate adjacent parcels to the town, and kind of provide a bit more detail around some of the pros and cons associated with annexation of specific parcels. So that would be incorporated into the 3-mile plan.
Okay, good.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Just in terms of the context of how you're going to produce that, are you using the existing comp plan and redlining it, or is it going to be like a whole new document from scratch? Like how are you guys going about doing it?
Yeah, so certainly the consultant team has reviewed and, read through not just the 2010 comp plan, but a lot of other historic planning documents. I think, though, that the 2010 comprehensive plan is dated enough that it is kind of a comprehensive rewrite in a lot of ways. Certainly there's things from that 2010 plan that are still relevant, but I think for all intents and purposes, it is essentially a new plan, and taking whatever is relevant from the 2010 plan, if that makes sense.
I was just thinking about from a review perspective, the best way to review the changes from
Sure.
one to the other. So that just makes it harder if it's just a brand new document is all. So
That's a fair point. I think, the end result of the document, I think we can strive to organize it in as close as the same way as the 2010 plan was organized, certainly to try to make it, easier to compare old with new.
So will you meet with adjacent landowners before you put stuff in the document about their properties, or who's making those determinations?
So over the coming months, the consultant team and town staff is working on a series of stakeholder meetings. Frankly, outside of the public engagement and survey that we have, earlier this month, we haven't scheduled any of these stakeholder meetings yet, but that will certainly be a part of the comprehensive planning process.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Any other questions or future agenda items? So just to remind, we'll have a meeting in October, but then remind us of the future meeting schedule.
Right. So next month, October is just as like normal, fourth Wednesday of the month. So that falls on October 23rd. And then as a reminder, we had discussed that our November meeting, we're going to move that up to November 13th because otherwise it would have fallen on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So November 13th, and then that will actually be our last meeting for the year.
Yeah. Okay.
We won't have a planning commission meeting in December.
All righty. Anything else?
We have, what do we have coming up at the next meeting?
So for October, outside of the presentation of the comprehensive plan survey results, the only other thing that I currently have on the agenda is a sketch plan, actually, that we received on the Clayton Court area. So.
Okay. Move to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I second it.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Thank
opposed?
you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
Thanks, Katie.